President, well, here we are today after 2 years, 2 years and 4 months, 2 years and 4 months of inaction. I didn't want to give him that extra 2 months. I thought that might have been a bit cruel. I like to get my figures correct, something the minister isn't too big on, but I like to get my figures correct. So 2 years and 4 months of inaction by this minister who was the shadow for the NDIS when the government was in opposition, who was an architect of the scheme, yet it's taken him 2 years and 4 months to bring his first piece of legislation forward. What a joke. Unbelievable. But here we are, and this should be what you would have thought a positive day, because the NDIS does have bipartisan support. We in government acknowledge that there were some problems around sustainability and were referred to by the minister as kabuki theatre, pearl-clutching kabuki theatre players, because it was absolute fallacy that there was ever any sustainability issues in his mind when he was the opposition spokesperson. Now he's the minister. Oops, oopsie. Lots of sustainability issues. Now we need to do something about it. So we are trying to get to some reform of this incredibly important scheme. We need to make sure that the NDIS is sustainable. And, maybe everyone in the disability community, everyone in this place may have had some more confidence if they'd actually been given the opportunity to properly scrutinise this bill. But of course, and we actually heard in the minister's contribution that, very proudly, there have been 5.5 days of hearings, 5.5 days, on what is an enormous part of the budget. This is an enormous contributor to the budget in so much as cost, yet we had 5.5 days because every government member of the Legislation Committee of Community Affairs was way too busy to ever hold a hearing when we wanted to look into this legislation. Funny though, the References Committee, of which many of them are the same members, could actually find more days and more opportunity to travel for our current menopause inquiry. We have had more days of hearings into menopause, of which there is no legislation around, than we've had on the NDIS, because the government doesn't want scrutiny of its legislation and will do anything it can to block it. And we've seen that constant politicking time and time again in trying to block transparency and in trying to make sure that no one really understands what's going on. And to Senator Steele-John's questions, they bandy this word co-design around as if warm and fuzzy people in the disability community all feel that we're here with you, we're going to co-design. Probably going to make you sign an NDA, and you're only going to be invited to the party if someone on your board or your organisation is a former NDIA board member, or someone that those members of the board of the NDIA happen to like, because they're the only organisations that are consulted with, they're the only organisations that are spoken to, and then they're made to sign NDAs. Lots of people in the community were not consulted around this legislation. And we hear that it's in response to reviews, NDIS reviews, that the government hasn't even released its response to, hasn't even let anybody know what their response to the review is. But yet this legislation is somehow based on that. It is an absolute joke. And we're actually here waiting for amendments. Apparently there's more amendments coming. Hold the phone. Apparently there's more amendments, but no one's seen them yet. We're not quite sure about what's happening. No one knows what's happening with those amendments. But, and this is based on the fact that the states and the territories don't know what is going on. See, we were told back in December that this financial sustainability that was all tickety-boo, all signed off by the premiers, everyone was happy. There's a financial sustainability framework attached to the NDIS now. It's going to cap future growth at 8%. We've been in here asking for the modelling behind that financial sustainability framework for months. We actually had NDIS Monday this morning. Again, 6 or 7 months, you're right, Senator Reynolds, it's becoming a joke because they won't provide it. And now they want us to pass legislation that's basically adhering to it, saying that this model is how we're going to cap growth at 8%. Now, no one's saying we don't want the growth capped. Everyone does want this scheme to be sustainable. But when you've got a demand-driven scheme, there's two ways. You cap the growth, and one is you reduce the number of participants, or you cap the amount on the plans, reduce the amount on the plans. Now, I'm the first to say I think there are too many people on it. The Greens and I are going to disagree when it comes to who's allowed on and off this scheme, because I do think there's too many people on it. I do think we need to define what's reasonable and necessary, and we need to define what is lifelong and permanent. This was a scheme established for people with a lifelong and permanent disability. And my heart breaks when I talk to families and those people have severe disabilities that completely impair their ability to live an individual life full of freedoms and choice. And it is the NDIS, when done properly, opens up the opportunities for these participants and their families. But then we see all of this expenditure for people who, quite frankly, shouldn't be on the scheme. They should never have been allowed on the scheme. You know, I'm going to go out there right now. There's a whole lot of autistic adults who get diagnosed in their 40s, 50s or so, and they're university professors, they've got families, they've got a house, they've got a job, and then all of a sudden they get a later-in-life diagnosis or a self-diagnosis. That's my favourite type, a self-diagnosis, and expect NDIS supports. I'm sorry, no. That's not what this is for. And the way that autism's bandied around is absolutely appalling, and I say that as the mother of a classically autistic son, someone who would be defined as having profound autism, who was diagnosed before level 1, 2 and 3 rubbish came into the DSM-5, someone who was actually given a diagnosis of autism when autism existed outside of all these other, you know, PDD and OS and global developmental delay, and even before Asperger's was taken away. These are the kids who need it. These are the kids who have significant cognitive impairment and are never going to be able to live by themselves. They're always going to need supports. Yet it is them at jeopardy because no one is prepared to actually stand up and say who should and shouldn't be on this scheme. And that's the first thing. But this doesn't really address this, what we're looking at. We're tinkering around the edges here. But some of these people that shouldn't be on the scheme, in my view, and I say it's my view, they shouldn't be on the scheme. What they are being offered outside as so the NDIS isn't the only lifeboat in the ocean, which it is at the moment because the states and territories vacated the fields. So part of this legislation is proposing that there is an introduction of foundational supports. Now, I don't mind the principle of foundational supports. They used to exist. What they were was there was a community health where there was an OT or a speechy, and kids that had a little bit of a delay or needed a little bit of a help along, you know, couldn't say the sound or something like that, could go and get a little bit of help and then go on with their lives. But now those community health services don't exist. So families who've got a child with a bit of a developmental delay are all looking to the NDIS because it's the only way they can access some of these now private speech therapists or OTs, because they don't exist in a public system anymore because the state government removed the funding for those. As soon as Julia Gillard, as the Prime Minister, along with the then Minister Shorten, along with Minister Macklin, when they introduced the NDIS and said to the states, don't worry, we'll absorb any of the additional cost blowouts, the states went, you beauty, we're off, and they just vacated the field. So we're supposed to be bringing in these foundational supports. But to Senator Steele-John's question about what is co-design, what is a foundational support? Now, I know what I think they should be, and we heard during the 5.5 days of inquiries we were so kindly granted by those opposite to look into this bill. We heard from lots of groups in the community and disability workers and representatives and advocates of those people what they think a foundational support should be, but we don't know. We don't know. There is no guidelines. There is no draft. These are to be developed at a later stage. Now, some people might be comfortable with that. They might think, well, there's pretty much general understanding. We want some community health, some access to public speeches and OTs. We need better supports in schools, so we need the education departments to step back up. So that's fine, what we kind of think they are, but is that what the government's talking about? So, Minister, what is a foundational support? When will a draft of foundational supports be available publicly? And what supports have the states agreed to deliver?